Bad news for the Buccaneers as Tristan Wirfs will miss multiple weeks. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at eKlosky WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Evan is, of course, on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. I am with you 3 days a week for just one more week. We're back to 5 days a week next week, so you can check everything out here. I am here along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you could support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, we have to talk about it. It's probably one of the top 5 worst things that could have come out about the Bucs as we're just a couple of weeks away from training camp. But Tristan Wirfs is set to miss multiple games after having knee surgery on Tuesday. We're going to talk about how this affects the offense as well as the roster coming up in a little bit. But Evan, let's just start with the news in general that Wirfs had surgery. There was more damage than initially thought. Now it looks like he is going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list.
Well, possibly. It's
right.
Looking like it.
Yeah, it's not definite, but it looks to be trending in that direction. And if that's the case, he's guaranteed to miss the first 4 games. That's at Atlanta, at Houston in prime time, home against the Jets, home against the Eagles. So what was your reaction to the news on Wednesday morning?
I mean, confusion, right? Confusion in the sense that if it was this severe of an issue, it's troublesome as to why it was, has such a result where he's going to miss like a quarter of the season, right? Like we haven't even started training camp yet. And we're waiting till July 8th to have surgery. So, I'm not going to. I need more information on how this all happened before truly understanding the gravity of how all these decisions were made. But I definitely want some answers. I think the fans deserve some answers. Maybe it was just a miscalculation or a setback. Tristan tweaked it. We'll find out. But that's the confusion part. Where I was not too confused is, David Shealy and myself were at mandatory minicamp. We didn't see Tristan for any of the voluntary stuff, which I guess maybe should have triggered me a little bit. Veterans sitting out for voluntary stuff, not rare. But given how Tristan was so excited to be a part of practice last year when he was going through the contract stuff, he hated sitting out practice. So he seemed like one of those guys like Antoine, certainly like Jamel, some of the veterans that show up during the voluntary portion. But when he was out there for the mandatory stuff, he did not look good. He was in that big old brace. They had him off to the side. He looked like when he was trying to get back to play post-bye week against the Giants, that's how he looked to me. Like he looked like a dude that was just going through it. And I think all of us, at least the day that I was out there, I'm turning left and right going like, man, Tristan looks bad. And Bowles, of course, said, it's precautionary and he should be ready for training camp. So you think, oh, maybe it's a sprain. Maybe it's something that he'll just have to lay off for a month and he'll be good. But obviously it's much worse. And, now we got to discuss the ramifications of it.
Yeah, it's not a good time. And Hugo on Twitter reached out. I had forwarded you the message because we were going to talk about it. And Hugo said, "Hi James, question: if he's been carrying this injury since last season, why is he having the surgery now and not a few months ago? Greetings from Uruguay." He wrote that part in Spanish. I'm not going to butcher the pronunciation. I'll give you the translation. But yeah, I mean, to your point, you're not the only one kind of confused by it. Hugo's confused by it.
And and remember this, that standard operating procedure for any NFL team out there. The season is over. You go through your end of season interviews. You also go through your end of season medical stuff, and decisions are made about, do you have to do surgery? Hey, like you're going to have to, rehab this injury, that injury. I mean, every player is like hurt at the end of the season. So, there's a multitude of things that you got to really worry about once the year is over. So there had to have been, and this isn't with me talking to anybody, but based on the SOP here, there had to have been a conversation between Tristan and the Bucs medical team about what to do about that knee, because obviously it was a problem last season, and entering the offseason, they needed to figure out what to do with that thing. Somehow, we don't know exactly what those conversations were. Hopefully we have more information in a couple of weeks when training camp begins. But ultimately, the decision was to let it heal and see if that was going to do the case and lay off the surgery. How that decision came about, why it turned why it went so south, and why they went in there and there was more issues to be found, we don't know, and we're gonna have to sit on that one for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and according to Rick Stroud, he had said that Wirfs had aggravated a right knee injury that he suffered last season. The Bucs had scheduled arthroscopic surgery on Tuesday, but there was more damage than what they initially thought, and I think that's kind of where the timetable gets all screwed up. Maybe if things were the way that they thought they were going to be, now he might miss the beginning of training camp. Maybe even miss the first game of the season. It probably isn't quite as long of a potential recovery period as it looks like they're going to have now. But this was a gut punch to the Bucs, to Bucs fans, to a lot of people out there, because no one really saw it coming. It's really kind of frustrating, especially when you take a look at the fact, and we're going to get to the roster and the depth chart a little bit later, but you take a look at the fact that Justin School was allowed to walk out the door when he filled in for Wirfs last year. And I'm not going to say he was, the same level, because nobody's on the level of Tristan Wirfs, but he was serviceable. And so now,
and there was continuity there and whatnot. Just remember, for everybody out there, outside of the game against the Giants, School was somebody who played and got better at right tackle. We don't have a lot of tape necessarily of him at left, and the game he played at left, they were against the Giants, and that was one of the snoozers of the season actually for this team. So it would have been different, but certainly the continuity would have helped, since continuity has been the key word this offseason. And I think it just, I don't want to be hyperbolic here. Do we want to talk about, I have a positive spin zone here. Give you the other side of the coin to it. Obviously, we can always talk about the negatives with Tristan Wirfs being injured. That's really obvious, right? It's a problem. And between Tristan Wirfs being healthy and injured, I'm going to choose healthy 900 times out of 900. But here's what I'll say in just the projection of this team. This is what's good news. This is coming down the chute, right? When Gedeke got hurt week 2, he threw School into the fire. You learned the hard way some of the things he could not do when he faced Aiden Hutchinson, and there was a chip plan and all these things devised moving forward. I even looked at the runs last year, right versus left. So they started that Detroit game, and they actually leaned on the School side. There were 7 runs to the outside on the right, and there were 3 runs to the left. That didn't really work out too well, to the point where we got to the Atlanta game, the last of School's stay there at right tackle before Gedeke, and we had 7 runs to the left, 4 runs to the right. So, and by the way, all those runs to the right were in the first half. In the fourth quarter, everything went to the left. So you're going to find out what people can do. But my point is, Liam Cohen was fact-finding things about Justin School in live time, in the middle of the season, in the beginning, just when you're in the heat of the moment. They got 6 weeks, 8 if you include the next couple of weeks where Grizzard can really hunker down and start thinking about some things that they want to do. So they will enter the season. The first few games are typically scripted to an extent. They know what they're going to do. So they'll have a game plan. They will know what to do. They'll also know what Heck can and cannot do effectively. And I would imagine, even though it's probably a little bit scary to play him in preseason games, you're going to have to play him in some preseason games to get him some live action and to really see what he can do. Obviously, if he were to get hurt, that would be a big problem. But I also tend to be someone that says it's football and you got to learn about him. And though, you're obviously going to hold out other people on the offensive line. So, we can get to that discussion another time, but you have time on your side at least. So that's the good here, is you don't have to start scrambling around pieces week 2. You got a whole training camp. They'll build out the continuity. They'll figure something out until Tristan can come back.
Well, and we are going to talk more about Charlie Heck coming up in a little bit, but Tristan was one of the top players that you did not want to see go down. But
probably number 2 on my list.
But who is his injury going to affect the most? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. FanDuel is super easy to use, and always where I go to place my parlays for just about every sport. But I also love futures bets and trying to predict champions across the sports landscape. Right now, the Buccaneers are plus 100 to win the NFC South, minus 158 to make the playoffs, and plus 2,800 to win the Super Bowl. That's behind teams like the Bengals, Vikings, Packers, Niners, Commanders, and Rams. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find the Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, obviously the Bucs did sign Charlie Heck for tackle depth after losing Justin School in free agency, and obviously Heck is no Wirfs. So the question is, who is this injury going to affect more? Baker Mayfield and the passing game, or Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and the running game?
Baker Mayfield and the passing game. I definitely think you're going to see, at least this would be how I would do it, which, by the way, Josh Grizzard is super duper smart, and why would he ever take my opinion? But in my opinion, I would go really foundational execution stuff, right? So this team is coming back. So, by the way, we still don't even know if Chris Godwin's going to be out there week 1. But for the most part, you have almost everybody returning from the offense now. Heck will be put in there, maybe Ibuka if Godwin can't go. Run the foundational stuff, the stuff that you can execute at a really high level. I think what you're going to see from this Grizzard type of offense is maybe leaning into the run game early in the season and evolving the passing game as the season moves on, as Tristan Wirfs comes back, because I know that Grizzard wants to be more vertical, wants to get some deeper routes in there, but you have to protect Baker. And at least, and I put it on my Twitter at eCloskey WTSP, looking at the film, Heck in pass pro worries me a lot more than Heck in the run. He is a mountain of a man. we're talking 6'8", 315 pounds. This is a big dude. You can probably devise a really nifty running attack around that, or at least get by. I am worried about, the charm of this offensive line is the ability to run that gap scheme, to move and to get everybody out in space. I don't know if Heck's going to be able to do that, but you should be able to at least still move, centers to guards, Gedeke, you'll see some of that, but certainly I believe they'll still be able to run the ball. It's going to put more pressure on the other 4 players to step up, but I don't know how you can put Baker in harm's way and just drop him back and hope for the best. Not to mention you're going to have to maybe have Otten chip now. You might have to, have the running back chip, make sure you get protection, and maybe Bucky or Rachaad White aren't used as much in the passing game to start because they got to help out Heck in protection. So that's what I mean. It's not even necessarily like protecting Baker back there, but you're going to have to protect Heck. And in doing so, you can't just run like 4 verts out there. You're going to peel another receiving option out or at least slow down the timing. So I really hope that you're going to have to look a little bit like last year's offense with quick decision-making, short stuff, move the chains. And as I said, you'll grow as the season goes on. But, the rushing attack, I don't think is going to be as affected as what we'll see the first 4 weeks from the passing attack.
Yeah, well, and I was going to bring up that clip that you put together of Heck on Twitter, because you captioned it with "you be the judge," and you've kind of given us your takeaway from what you saw. So given some of the struggles that I saw, and obviously you saw in pass protection, is this a situation now where the Bucs are going to have to run multiple tight end sets just so that they have an extra guy there? Maybe it's Payne Durham, maybe it's Kokeeft, but they're going to have another body over there with Heck trying to help protect Baker. Because you're talking about week 2, even week 1 against the Falcons, they loaded up on pass rushers in the draft. Week 2, you got to face Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. Week 4, you got to face just the Eagles in general in their pass rush. So is this now a situation where if Wirfs is out the first 4 weeks, you have to have another body there next to Heck if you're going to give Baker any time at all to be able to drop back and pass?
On certain plays, yes. On other plays, you can actually run screens. You can have ghost screens, right? Like you run a motion that's going to freeze the guy for a second before he continues his rush plan. And you can throw motion in there to do what an extra body would do, but you can't do that all the time, right? So there are going to be some plays where you're like, let's make sure we have protection, and we're going to, take Otten out of this play. We're going to take Bucky out of this play, Rachaad out of this play. You're going to have to do some of that stuff. You can't leave your left tackle on an island. I mean, that was the beautiful part about this team was that with Tristan and with Luke, you can leave them on an island and you can really kind of operate as needed. We talk about sort of the 4-man rush of the defense, right? And how amazing that would be if the defense can create pressures with 4 men. Well, with the Bucs offensive line, technically, they can handle a lot more than a lot of other teams because they're so stout with their starting 5 up there that you can take some risk and leave some people on islands to create more routes, create more problems for the secondary. But you're going to obviously have to peel some of that back. So we saw Liam Cohen do that last year, weeks 2 through 5, right? The Atlanta game was crazy, but they grew into it, right? They grew into School. They found out what he did well, and he wasn't a liability. After week 2, School did a bang-up job. They also went 2-2 in that stretch. And I think for most fans out there, if I said right now, in the beginning of July, would you take 2-2 to start the season? I would accept that deal, right? You would take that deal, James?
Knowing that Tristan is out, yeah, I'd take 2-2.
Well, knowing Tristan was out, yeah, of course. Yeah, I wouldn't say that if Tristan was healthy. But knowing that Tristan's going to be out probably for 4 games, could be more, but at least probably for 4 games, you just got to make it. You got to make it to 2-2. And even with Tristan, 2-2, 3-1 was probably the target range there, as weeks like 4 through 7 are probably the toughest of the year. But we do know a history that the Bucs are going to play it safe to begin the year. We've seen it with Kalijah Cansey back-to-back seasons. They kind of learned, I guess, from the first year of, this playing in week 1, and that didn't work out so well. Last year, they took it real easy and sat him the first 5 games, I believe, because Atlanta was the Thursday nighter. So yeah, it's going to be different. I don't necessarily think it's going to tank this team. Does it maybe limit the ceiling and what they want to do? Probably. But luckily, they do have a lot of good players, and I trust that they'll come up with something to make sure that Baker Mayfield doesn't get screwed over in any of this.
All right, well, we talked about offensive line depth last week. Time to revisit that conversation. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs. I'm not holding out the wrap for such a somber episode because I'm sad. We should be excited for that that opening. But look, Charlie Heck was supposed to be the depth piece behind Tristan Wirfs, and for probably at least the first 4 weeks, he is now going to be the starter. So what about the depth behind Heck? Is this where the Bucs have to make a move of some sort, or is this a situation where one of these undrafted rookies are going to have to step up and make the initial 53-man roster? We're really going to put the Jason Light offensive line guru title to the test.
Yeah, well, they gave Ben Chukwuma a fat amount of money, comparatively speaking, for his services as an undrafted free agent. We don't really know much about him. We know he is a physical specimen, but he is raw. He is a raw talent. So without seeing him in action, don't really know what is necessary. I'll also add serviceable tackles are few and far between on the open market, right? I mean, I think I saw today, like George Font and Donovan Smith are kind of the options out there. Like, does that make you feel more confident about moving forward into the season? Like, theoretically, I think they can sign a veteran like one of them to back up Heck, and then somebody you can release when Wirfs is back with the team. But I don't know what trade is out there. Like, Wirfs is coming back, so are you going to make a huge trade for and sacrifice tons of assets for a backup tackle who's going to play 4 games, maybe 5? We don't know the severity of it, but it's just you're kind of stuck. You're kind of stuck, and you got to deal with it because it's not a season-ending injury, as far as we know. It's not a season-ending injury, so you can't really. I don't know what you're supposed to do. Justin School were kind of those options out there. The Vikings had an opening early in the season, similarly of what the Bucs are now going to go through, of their star left tackle who's going to miss the first handful of weeks. School took that opportunity. If the Bucs would have known that this was going to happen, they would have probably kept him. So it's just a sad situation. But I don't know what you're supposed to do here. If you can get a veteran option, I would have, and I'm sure Jason Light will, I would have all my scouts scouring over preseason film and seeing who stands out. And remember, if they don't make another team's 53-man roster, you can take them as long as you put them on your 53-man roster. So those games always happen as well. I believe, was it Raekwon O'Neal? Did he go to the Seahawks and then back to the Bucs that way? One of the Buccaneers lost an offensive lineman that way. whatever. But it has happened before, and they grabbed Ben Stilley last year in that form and fashion. So that's to me the game plan. Watch the preseason film, scour it, see if somebody doesn't make the 53, put him on there, backup Heck, and then when Wirfs comes back, you can let him go.
Yeah, because left tackles on the open market right now, according to Spot Track, there's two. There's two left tackles. One is 34 and a half years old, Tyron Smith, who obviously from watching the Jets last year, and then Jerron Christian from Cleveland. If you're still a left tackle available at this point, you're probably better off with the undrafted rookie that you gave a bunch of guaranteed money to, because at least you can develop him and keep him for a longer period of time.
If Heck were to get injured, I think then you would have to, at a necessity, sort through those options.
Yeah, well, and again, according to Spot Track, Tyron Smith, his estimated market value is still $7.5 million. I realize that's chump change for
I thought he retired,
but I mean,
that can always change. I thought he retired.
If he hasn't filed his paperwork yet, then he's still available.
Okay. Well,
but yeah, I think I'm kind of with you on the fact that if they're going to make a move, it's probably going to be a roster cut of some sort, because there's just nothing else out there. You don't really have a choice at this stage in the game. You have to roll with Heck, you roll with Chukwuma, and you see who gets cut. And if it's somebody that you're willing to give a roster spot to pluck them off of a practice squad, or to claim off waivers. So this sucks, man. That's there's no other way around it. This sucks.
Yeah. As I said, I wish I had, a lot of people have asked me questions. I wish I have great answers for you. And I know everybody wants to slam the medical team, and they might need to be criticized. I'm not here to say that that's not a possibility, but at this point, we just don't have enough details. And unfortunately with Bowles, you never quite know if you can trust all the details you're getting out of his mouth anyway. No disrespect, but he's the same guy that told us Wirfs was held out for precautionary reasons and he'd be fine for training camp. And then 2 weeks later, that blew up in his face. And I can count endless times that Bowles has said one thing and the other has happened. So, I think back to the Devin White scenario with the whole debacle of him not playing that game in Green Bay, and think back to the Trask-Baker competition where Trask was thrown out there in the second half. He had no idea he was playing, and Baker didn't play a snap, even though before the game you said, both are going to play and they're going to flip-flop. So sadly, we got to live in the unknown with some of this stuff, but considering he's going, Bowles is going to step up to the podium, and 90% of the questions are going to be about Wirfs. So, it's a long – training camp as a media member is long, all right? We got plenty of days to talk about how excited you are for training camp. We need to know this information today. So that I can already tell you that's going to be a big thing. It's going to be right back to the gamut on that one.
All right, well, in Todd Bowles' defense, he basically flat out told all of us that they were going to take a wide receiver in the first round. So I'll give him that. Evan, what do we have going on over on 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app?
Remember to check in on the Ultimate Florida Sports Show on 10 Tampa Bay Plus. We tape every Thursday, but it airs throughout the week at your convenience. We will obviously be talking about Tristan Wirfs. There's some Jaguars news. We'll talk Home Run Derby, the Scottish Open, the Open Championship coming up next week, and our favorite bets there. So we have plenty of fun things to discuss, including I'll chime in a little bit on the Rays and the rotation and how they're going to fit everything in there. But remember, 10 Tampa Bay Plus, you can also watch our 6 and 11 Sportscast. That's where you can find me. You can also head to 10tampabay.com or hit me up directly at eClaski WTSP on the X. As long as you're not a jerk, I am going to respond, and that's the best way to reach.
All right. Yep. Make sure you're checking all of that out. I'm sure Evan will be talking about how bad the Lightning got ripped off by trading. It was a Will Howard and not getting Connor McDavid.
Will Howard is the quarterback at Ohio State, who's now the Steelers.
Yeah.
Isaac Howard.
Thank you.
Ike. He wants to go by Ike. Ike Howard is the one who went to the Oilers for Sam O'Reilly. And honestly, I think they did pretty good with that trade. Considering
it should have been McDavid, straight up.
Oh, yes. Of course. Yeah, you're
all right, fine. We'll throw in Braden Point, but McDavid coming back.
Yeah.
All right. Make sure you're checking out everything that Evan is doing there on 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. Please make sure that you are following along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at eCloskey, WTSP. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcast. Follow over on TikTok, having all kinds of fun over there. Falcons fans, big mad in the comments on the last video that got posted there. Just like Bengals fans were big mad a couple videos before that. I'm having fun. What can I say? Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.